All right, we're back, and it's time for our Dynasty Debates segment. As we've been doing all throughout the month of January here, we've been taking your questions here, fantasy mailbag at yahoosports.com. That's the best way to get your Dynasty debate discussed on the show. We've got some to get through. We'll see how many we can get through here in this segment, Boone, for today. Let's start with Wes. Has a really interesting question here. Running backs for quarterbacks. I play solely in Superflex Dynasty League. Something that has struck me over the past few seasons is the trade action between quarterbacks and running backs. I've turned down many offers where a seller is trying to send a running back my way for a QB or a QB plus. Makes no sense to me in Dynasty, in particular Superflex. However, these major trade calculators, which are flawed, I know, often value these running backs over quarterbacks. For example, I recently turned down Josh Jacobs for Jared Goff. I would be the one acquiring Jacobs. Goff seems so much more valuable in terms of points scored and longevity. Using Keep Trade Cut, however, it has Jacobs more valuable than Goff. I recently had someone try to send me Gibbs for Cam Ward, a 2027 first, and Colson Loveland, which comes close in a calculator but makes no sense. Why would a stud rookie quarterback, stud rookie tight end, and a first rounder be considered fair for a running back who will be out of the league long before the others? Make it make sense. Have we lost the plot, or does player longevity cause illusory value here? Thanks, Wes. Great question, I think, from a macro standpoint. Boone, number one, how valuable are quarterbacks in Superflex? And two, player longevity. Like, is that kind of a false flag in terms of the value here? Just your thoughts on the whole situation.
Player longevity is something that you should consider as a data point, but you shouldn't be building your fantasy teams completely around that, because normally you want to focus on like the next 2 to 3 years max. And sometimes you might just want to look at the next 1 to 2 years, to be honest, because so much can change in terms of injuries, in terms of coaching. I mean, look at this year. Look how many coaches changed, right? Like, this is incredible the way the league turns over year after year. And if you think you know exactly how long a player is going to be good for and how many years he's going to play for and all that sort of stuff, I think that can end up putting you in a spot where you look kind of foolish. Now, in terms of quarterback value in Superflex leagues, so valuable, so valuable to the point where I want to roster even backups in some of the deeper dynasty leagues that I have, because if you get that quarterback injury, a backup quarterback in Superflex can be almost as valuable as like holding on to those backup running backs where you're hoping that they get that opportunity, and you don't even have to start them. You can then turn around and trade them to a manager who needs a quarterback at that point. Maybe the manager who just lost the quarterback to an injury, and you send the backup that way, and now they get to start that guy. So I think that's one point here. I also think, and I don't want to speak ill of any other sites out there, any other trade calculators, any other dynasty trade values or anything like that, but you got to do your research and figure out, who's doing it in a way that you feel like you kind of feel the same about the values of the players, right? And look around, look at everyone's. I obviously do dynasty trade value charts. A lot of people out there do. Go see who is actually valuing players the way that you feel that they're valued, and start to follow that one. Start to use that as your guide or as a data point. I think that's important. Or do what I did before my career started. Start to do your own trade value charts, because it's a fun exercise to do. And you could kind of look at others like mine as that starting point and then build off of there. But I think that's important. You want to make those final decisions. Now, I do want to say, Keep Trade Cut. It's a great tool. You can use that. There's a lot of people involved. It's the wisdom of the masses kind of thing. But I will say that when you go to Keep Trade Cut, it pops up on the screen, 3 players, keep one, trade one, cut one, and you decide, and then you submit, and then it gives you access to the site. Does everyone do that to the best of their ability, or are people just clicking buttons to get into the site, right?
No,
so I don't know that you necessarily want to rely
into the site.
Right? So I don't know that you want to rely on that as like your one source. Can it be one of a few sources? Yeah, sure. Agree. But just looking at that and saying this is like the blueprint exactly, I don't think that is the way to go here. Now, if we think about these trades specifically, and I saw this question before we started, so I went and looked at the actual values that I have in my trade value charts here. In the case of Jacobs and Goff, totally agree. Jacobs, an older back, I have him as a 48 in terms of his dynasty trade value points. He's the RB16 in my dynasty rankings. Goff I have as a 63 in Superflex value. He's the QB20. So that gives you an idea of how much more valuable I see Goff than Jacobs here. Now, the second trade that was mentioned, I think this one's a little more interesting because Gibbs for Cam Ward, Colston Loveland, and a 2027 first. It does seem like a lot that the person is giving up to get Gibbs, but I think this is one where it depends where that person is in terms of their roster build. If you're a contender, I might be willing to overpay to get a player like Gibbs, because how else are you going to get a player like Gibbs? People aren't going to give that guy away for the exact value amount that any trade value calculator has. They're going to want more, right? Especially if it's someone that needs to rebuild, needs these younger pieces. So that's a trade that I don't think is crazy. I think I'd be willing to do it if I'm a contender and I want to get an elite player like Gibbs, who I have as my RB2 overall in Dynasty. He's also young. He's 23 right now. He turns 24 this year. So you're getting a player who is going to have many seasons, hopefully, if he can stay healthy. It's not like he's an older back that you're giving up all of this for. And then you look at the other side, and I said earlier, like Cam Ward, what is his fantasy ceiling? Could he be your QB2 for the next 10 years? Maybe. But does he have that elite, difference-making kind of ceiling? I don't think he does. So I'm not worried about giving up that piece. Colston Loveland, I think, is going to be really good, but it's at a position that doesn't have as much value in Dynasty and tight end, unless it's tight end premium, which would change the equation here. And then the 2027 first, it does look like a really strong class, and yet you don't know where that pick's going to be. If this person is a contender who's getting Gibbs, that pick might be very late in the round, and then you're looking at, can you actually hit on the right player in that first round to make that pick valuable? So I think that trade, to me, even though if you look at a trade value chart like mine, it would say that the 3 pieces for the 1, the 3 pieces are more valuable. It's one that I could totally justify if the Gibbs manager is looking to contend and they're trying to find that extra big piece that can be that weekly winner for them or potentially that league winner for them. It's a move that I think I would be willing to make in the right circumstance.
No, I think that makes a ton of sense, and it's a good breakdown there. Clearly, the answer is read Justin Boone's trade value charts. That's the answer to the question here. But I think the only thing I'd kind of balk at in terms of the question is the stud rookie quarterback thing. Like, maybe Cam Ward is a stud fantasy quarterback. Maybe he falls into that, just like you mentioned earlier in the breakout segment, a QB2 type that holds down the job but isn't really a needle mover in fantasy. And Jahmyr Gibbs is a needle mover regardless of your format. And like you said, guy isn't even on his contract extension yet. He should be very, very good for a long time. Last one that we'll get to today comes in from Twitter. This is from GF Screg, something, a bunch of numbers here. You never know with these Twitter handles. Anyways, we're just going to take the one question here. There was a bunch of questions, but the main one was, should CeeDee Lamb still be counted as an elite dynasty wide receiver or just a good one? I think this is a good question, Boone, because when do you view it as, number one, what is your view of who is an elite dynasty wide receiver right now? And 2, does CeeDee Lamb belong in that? And when do you start to kind of knock a guy down from that elite tier to maybe top of tier 2?
So that elite tier right now, I think we talked about them last week. It would be Puka Nacua, it would be JSN, and it would be Jamar Chase. CeeDee Lamb, not that far behind, though. And I think the way people are viewing this season, the George Pickens scenario, all that sort of stuff, the injuries that Lamb dealt with this year, I think that's kind of got his value down a bit. And listen, maybe he won't average over 10 targets per game like he did in 2023 and 2024, but I think he's going to be really close. I think this guy is still a phenomenal player. And if you look at the numbers this year, I know the touchdowns were down, but we know touchdowns can be very volatile, right? So I think a down year for touchdowns is not like a death sentence in terms of his fantasy value. And he did finish pretty slow the last couple of weeks, but he was also on a team that wasn't really contending for anything. So maybe that factors in as well. But if we just look at the 10 games that he played before that, he had over 100 yards in 6 of those 10 games, Harmon. His lowest output was 66 yards. I would say that's not even that bad when you're talking about a fantasy floor. 66 yards. I mean, we see some of the top wideouts go out there and have 1 catch. For him to have 66 yards in his lowest game in that 10-game stretch, that's still very good. And if you look at that 10-game stretch, he averaged 9.9 targets, 6.3 catches, and 97.6 yards in a full 17-game season. That puts him on pace for huge numbers. Over 100 catches, over 1,600 yards. Like, he is still that dude. So we'll see what happens with George Pickens. That will factor in here for sure. And yes, maybe he's not on the same tier now as those very, very elite top guys. But I would say if he's not in that conversation, he is damn close, because this guy is still a phenomenal receiver. And I think because of those injuries, because some of those big Pickens performances, and because the way the season kind of, crawled to the finish for Lamb, I think people are looking at him totally the wrong way. This guy is still a meaningful fantasy asset.
Yep, I literally have him, not to spoil the content here, but I have him as the very top player in tier 2. So yeah, he's right there to me. And any of those guys in tier 2 with the right couple of breaks, for the most part, especially the guys towards the top, could easily be tier 1 guys. It just, the one thing happens this way or the other. And Lamb is certainly one of those guys. Still an awesome talent. Had a high ankle sprain, in week 3 of this season, or very, very early on. So who knows if he was ever 100% healthy. Also had just some weird drops throughout the course of the year. So you imagine that 1, he'll be healthier, and 2, like drops are not sticky season to season. And for the most part, it doesn't even really move the needle as much as we think as it does anyway. So I'd definitely be buying CeeDee Lamb if people think he's had some sort of major fall off